Good evening.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm Jordana Morsa-Jeze. I'm professor of modern and contemporary art in the United States here in the Department of Art History and Archaeology, and I'm also director of the Driscoll Center. I want to precede my welcome, as we do with all events at the University of Maryland, with a land acknowledgement. Every community owes its existence and strength to the generations before them around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy into making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to migrate from their homes in hope of a better life. And some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Truth and acknowledgement are critical in building mutual respect and connections across all barriers of heritage and difference. We believe it is important to create dialogue to honor those that have been historically and systematically disenfranchised. So, we acknowledge the truth that is often buried. We are today on the ancestral lands of the Piscataway people, who are among the first in the Western Hemisphere. We are on indigenous land that was stolen from the Piscataway people by European colonists. We pay our respects to Piscataway elders and ancestors, and I ask that you please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. Thank you. Tonight, it's my pleasure to welcome you into the Collaboratory for an artist lecture by LaToya M. Hobbs. Before she's introduced, I want to take just a moment to thank my colleagues, Dr. Karin Zitzowitz, Chair of Art History and Archaeology, Taras Matla, who made it in at the last second, yes, Director of the University of Maryland Art Gallery, and Jessica Gatlin, Assistant Professor in the Department of Art, for their support and their sponsorship of this event. Thank you also to the Driscoll Center graduate assistants, Clea Masiani, Juhi Kim, and Dominic and Pearson, who helped to coordinate all of the various logistics for our evening. They've all skillfully and creatively organized a reception for all of you directly after the talk. So as he walks away, I would now like to welcome Dominic to the lectern. He'll introduce our speaker tonight and help moderate questions afterwards. Thank you.
You guys can clap for Dr. Zitzowitz. Thank you for the introduction. And again, thank you to everyone for coming out. Please come in, sit down, your seats. And thank you, Professor Hobbs, for being here. Welcome to the University of Maryland. Professor Hobbs is joining us this week as an ARTT visiting artist to work on a print edition that she will be working on all week here on campus, and hopefully it'll be done by Sunday.
Hopefully.
Fingers crossed. You may be able to catch a glimpse of it in the video at the end. If you pay attention, it'll be there. Let me tell you a little bit about Professor Hobbs. LaToya M. Hobbs is an artist, a wife, and mother of two from Little Rock, Arkansas, who is currently living and working in Baltimore, Maryland. She received her BA in painting from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock and an MFA in printmaking from Purdue University. Her work deals with figurative imagery that addresses the ideas of beauty, cultural identity, and womanhood as they relate to women of the African diaspora. Her exhibition record includes numerous national and international venues, including the National Art Gallery of Namibia, Windhoek, Namibia, SCAD Museum of Art, Albright Knox Museum, and Sophia Wanamaker Galleries in San Jose, Costa Rica, among others. Her work is housed in private and public collections, such as the Harvard Art Museum, the Petrucci Family Foundation Collection of African American Art, the National Art Gallery of Namibia, the Getty Research Institute, and the Baltimore Museum of Art, and the Driscoll Center. This is a piece that was purchased between the Driscoll Center and the University of Maryland Art Gallery. Her other accomplishments include the 2020 Janet and Walter Sondheim Artscape Prize, a nomination for the 2022 Queen Sandra Print Award, and a 2022 IFPDA Artist Grant. She is also a professor at the Maryland Institute College of Art and a founding member of Black Women of Print, a collective whose vision is to make visible the narratives and works of Black women printmakers, past, present, and future. Professor Hobbs is with us today to present Print and Process, Current Works and Women's Studio Workshop Residence. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor LaToya M. Hobbs.
Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
How's everybody? Good. Can y'all hear me good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for being here. I know the school semester just started and people are trying to wrap their minds around getting in the groove of college again. So thank you all the professors who are lending your students during your much valuable class time. I want to acknowledge my family who's here with me today. My husband, Ariston, and my two boys, Ade and Theo, drove up to be with me this evening. So, thank you. So I tend to over prepare for my presentation. So I have a lot of slides and a little bit of time. So I don't want to go through everything that they just went through in my introduction. But I will just kind of give you an overview of what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to share some current works with you. And I recently finished a residency over the summer at the Women's Studio Workshop. So I'm going to give you guys a first glimpse at some of those completed pieces. With all of my presentations, I start off with just introducing myself by showing an image of me and my family because they are so important to my life and also so influential to the work that I do. And there's not a decision that I make about my practice or my general life that I'm not considering them in some way, shape, form, or fashion. So, all right. Okay, so before I get into the residency works that I did this summer, I do just want to give a brief overview of my practice. As I mentioned in my bio, my background is in painting and printmaking. And so a lot of my current works have been creating a marriage between both of those two disciplines. So I do a lot of mixed media works or hybrid works where you see elements of myself as a painter and elements of myself as a printmaker. So kind of taking the things that I enjoy most about each of those disciplines and putting them together. These first two works are kind of exemplary of the work that I was doing in graduate school. As I mentioned, I started out as a painting major, but eventually fell in love with printmaking after being introduced to the work of Elizabeth Catlett. And so that's kind of how I made the decision to pursue my MFA degree in printmaking. I felt like I could paint anywhere as long as I had an easel and some paints and a canvas. I can, do that anywhere. But with printmaking, it's such a specialized process. I decided that I wanted to take advantage of having access to a printing press whenever I needed to as a graduate student. So that kind of pushed me to want to study printmaking more exclusively in graduate school. Now I still painted, but a lot of this time I was in graduate school from 2010 to 2013. So a majority of that time was spent making prints, doing paintings here and there. But this is where kind of my identity as a printmaker was born, I would say. And I think that's kind of what people most recognize me as now. But now I'm trying to kind of change that narrative and say, not change the narrative, but bring in all aspects of myself into my work together. And so this is kind of exemplary of some of the work that I'm doing now. As I mentioned, I like to combine elements of my painting and printmaking practice together. So this encompasses a lot of the techniques and processes that I do. This work is titled Queen Anne. It's a portrait of my mother. Her name is Angela. We call her Anne, my family, as her nickname. So it's an homage to my physical mother, but also to my art mothers. So you can see in the background, there's references to Elizabeth Catlett, as well as Samilla Lewis, who are amazing Black women artists and printmakers. So from the detail, you can see there's a few different processes happening. A lot of these lend more toward myself as a painter. So you can see the hand is done with a traditional oil painting. The clothing, I render that by carving, painting back into it, carving again. There's some collaging. So it's really, I like the challenge of taking these very different things and putting them together in a very seamless way. So the viewer has to take some time to investigate to really see what's happening on the surface of the piece. I think this is maybe one of my favorite pieces right now. It's titled Aaron and Anaya with Hydrangeas. Aaron is on the left of the composition. That is my stepdaughter. And Anaya, I guess she was my step niece. I guess is how you would describe. Something that has been coming into my work a lot lately is like flowers and foliage, which represents like a form of self-care for me, which is kind of a underlying theme of the work that I've been doing in this larger kind of broader series titled Salt of the Earth. But here again, you can see me kind of bringing elements forward from both my printmaking practice and my painting practice. As you can probably tell, I'm really in love with carving. That's the kind of thing that I enjoy most about my printmaking practice, which is steeped in like traditional like wood blocks and linoleum carving. So that's the thing that I kind of enjoy the most, but bringing that to the forefront and presenting what I like to call the matrix as the art object. So with printmaking, typically you carve your block, you print your editions, and then the block just kind of gets tucked away somewhere. But I find there's so much beauty in that surface. And so I decided, well, like, why can't this be the art itself? So again, like you can see elements of both of those worlds coming together. Here's another piece. This is a large scale relief carving. Again, you can see like foliage kind of creeping in to things. This is titled Jeanette's Daughters. Yeah, really just like an homage to my love of the carving process. So all of this is just, they're cherry wood panels that I carved black, which you can kind of see here in this process photo. I started by painting these panels black. I do a really detailed drawing in a white, like water soluble pencil. And then from there, kind of all of the carving magic takes place. And then I included this just to give you an idea of the scale. Sometimes when you look at images online, you aren't always able to tell how big they are. But this piece is 8 inches tall, 8 feet tall, 12 feet wide. So this was an image of my installation space at the IFPDA print fair last year. As I mentioned in my bio, I was awarded an artist grant to create new work and display it at the fair. So that's that. Here's another current work. This was debuted at my solo show titled Flourish, same title piece of the work, but debuted at the Virginia Museum of Contemporary Art earlier this year. Something that I've really been striving to do with my work is create what I like to describe as narrative portraiture. A lot of my work is steeped in portrait and figurative work, but I really want to not only show like the physicality of the people that I'm portraying in my work, but give you some insight as to who they are. So this is a portrait of Mahari Chavar. She is the founder of Studio House, which is a program in Baltimore that kind of fosters a sense of community for Baltimore artists. So it's basically a row house that they've converted to have like room and studio space for artists so they can stay for a certain amount of time. I was invited to be a visiting artist there last year, and it was just such a great experience. And Mahari, she's an artist, but she also, her art is painting, but she also considers herself a curator of spaces. So she's literally like changing around the living room like every few months or so. But there was just such a warm and homey environment, like plants literally everywhere. So I wanted to kind of capture the feeling of that. So I'm showing you Mahari, but also giving you insight to like the location or other things that are significant about her through the things that are included in the space. So out of the window, you can see like traditional like Baltimore row houses to kind of give you an insight of location. Above her head, there's a painting that says 757. That's the zip code for Virginia Beach. She's from Virginia Beach. The show also debuted at Virginia Beach. And then on the other side is the dogwood, which is like the national flower for Virginia. You can see a detailed shot there. Okay, and this next piece just kind of highlights carving out time, which is I think is the most significant thing I've done with my career so far. So this work is basically takes the viewer on a journey through my day. So from start to finish. So I'm kind of showing you my experience as a mother and practicing artist. I describe it as one work in 5 parts. So this here on the screen is a studio shot of me with the first scene of this work. And on this next slide, it's an excerpt taken from a kind of a behind the scenes video that kind of describes the making of that work. It's 11 minutes long. Just for sake of time, I didn't want to show the whole thing, but I do want you to be able to kind of experience all the parts that make up this work. So this is kind of at the end of the interview after I've like talked about all of the process and inspiration, and how you get to kind of see all of the works together. So it starts out in the morning. This section is titled Homeschool and Housework. In the middle of the work is titled Dinner Time. And if you pay attention, there's like art references that I'm including. So here there's a reference to Valerie Maynard and Carrie James Marshall. Then we get into the fourth scene or fourth section of the work is titled Bedtime for the Boys, highlighting my children's work in the center. Those are their actual drawings that let me borrow for the work. And then after all the tasks of the day are done, the boys are put to bed, I finally get to take off my mom hat and then step into the studio, which is the title of the final piece. Okay, so just like a snippet of that work. The piece and its the total dimensions of the work are 8 feet tall, 60 feet wide. So if you want to take a look at the whole video, you can check it out on my YouTube channel, LaToya Hobbs Studio. Okay. That work does exist in 2 forms. As I mentioned, I'm really interested in presenting the matrix as the art object. So from the onset of creating the work, the intention was to have the panels be the final art work. But listening to the wisdom of my husband, he stressed that I had to print the panels, so it exists in 2 forms. So before you saw the actual like wood block matrices that are now in the collection of the Baltimore Museum of Art, but there also exists a small edition of prints that were pulled from the blocks. So here you can see what all of the paper versions of those particular scenes look like. And then here is like a studio shot for scale reference. Okay, so now I'm going to get into some of my more current works. A couple of years ago, I was awarded a studio residency grant through the Women's Studio Workshop, but unfortunately COVID hit, and then we kind of had to postpone. So finally I was able to actually attend that residency this summer. It was in Kingston, New York, kind of in upstate New York. Again, I was there for 6 weeks, and it was a fully like printmaking based residency, which was really interesting for me because it's been a while since I've been just like fully engaged in like just traditional printmaking work. I've done like a print here, a print there over the past few years. I've been more interested in like my mixed media paintings. So it was a really like, I don't know, eye-opening experience, a reminder of like how intense it is to be a printmaker. I had this list of like 15 different projects that I was going to do. And then when I got started, I was like, yeah, you're probably going to get to about 7 of these things. Because I just had to like remember like, oh, ink has to dry before I put the next layer. Oh, remember, you have to tear down this paper. So I kind of took a lot of those things for granted. So these next few slides are just going to walk you through some of the pieces that I created while I was there. So the teacher in me always feels that it's important to explain the process of printmaking, because I feel a lot of times people just don't know what happens in the printmaking studio. So a lot of times when people say prints, I show people prints and say, oh, this is a cool painting. I'm like, this isn't a painting, this is a print. So these next few slides just kind of go through the process. So the first thing that you want to do is develop your matrix. And so matrix is whatever like surface that you're working on. So if you're doing a lithography, your matrix is a stone. If you're doing intaglio, your matrix is like a copper plate or a zinc plate. I particularly focus on woodcut. So my matrices are always wood blocks, and I prefer to use cherry wood. So hardwood, and it holds a lot of nice marks. I do a lot of like detailed images with intricate carving. So here you can see that I've kind of developed the imageries for this work. And this is going to be a double block print. So meaning that there's going to be 2 layers of color in addition to like the white of the paper. And so for each color that you do, you have to have a block that goes along with that. So you can see here, this, use my pointer. Yes. So this image is called the key block. So it has like the main information that's going to make up the image. And then this, I'm calling this like the gold block because it's like a black and gold print. So once your drawing is like to the point where you want it to be, the next step is to do your carving. So here it just shows these same blocks carved. And in the carving stage, you have to be really careful to plan like how you want things to coordinate. So again, you're going to be putting these layers on top of each other. So you want to make sure that you plan things out so that things show up where they're supposed to show up, that nothing is covered up, doesn't get covered up by accident. Okay. So the next stage is the proofing or like printing stage. So you're going to ink up your blocks to see how they look when they're printed on paper. Typically, if like you've done, like if you're satisfied with your carving, you say, okay, this is the way I want it to look. You can kind of go to your nice paper. But before you do that, we normally print on newsprint just to see how it looks and do all of our testing. I may say that, oh, this doesn't look right. I need to recarve some areas. So I can do that on newsprint until I feel like I've got that image the way that I want it to look. So this shows me inking up the gold layer or the base layer. You want to print like from lightest to dark. And then it's placed on the drying rack because all of your layers have to be dry before you add more layers on top. So here's me inking up the key block or the black block, getting ready to print that. What I'm holding is like an ink roller, or we also call it a brayer. On the other image in my hand is an ink knife, so I'm using that to kind of mix my ink and also like spread it across on like the ink slab. Okay, now this is like the printing part. So here I am on the left side of the screen. You can see me doing what we call registration. If you notice, there's tape marks on, sometimes I have like a clear acetate sheet. If my block is really large, I just use the press bed itself. But there's markers for where the block is supposed to go, and there's also markers for where the paper is supposed to go. So if you're printing multiple layers, you want to make sure that all of those layers are like getting in the same place every time. So that's what we call registration in the print world. And so you can see the black block is on the press bed, the gold layer is already like ready to go. And so this is what we call like a hinge registration. So the paper is taped on the side that's closest to like the roller. And so when I'm ready to put the paper down, I'm making sure that it stays in place. It doesn't shift or move or anything like that. All right, next, I'm putting some backing onto my block before I roll it through the press. And so again, the purpose of the press is that you have a tight pressure that's going to transfer the ink from your block to your paper. And so you just have to do a lot of trial and error to get the correct pressure. So that's kind of what the proofing stage is for. And you see those pieces of paper on the wall back there. Those are a result of me like just testing the amount of ink that I'm using, testing that I have the right pressure. And so you want to make sure that all of those elements are good before you go to like your nice paper, because you don't want to be guessing on pieces of paper that cost like $10 or more. And so over here, after going through the press, you lift the paper and you pray that everything printed well. And if it does, you have a great print and you're happy and all is right in the world. But you have to do that for every single print that you're going to do in the edition. So if your edition is 50, then you have to go through that process on 50 sheets of paper or more, because you want to have artist proofs. So printmaking 101, in case people didn't know. So a little bit about this work. This piece is titled A Moment of Care. As I mentioned before, I'm really into this idea of exploring self-care. And that's something that is like happening in my personal life. So obviously it's going to seep into my work as well. Something that I just find as like a small moment of joy throughout my day are scented candles. I have them in my studio, in my home. I brought one with me in the hotel. So just a way to like, they're calming. I'm really responsive to like scents, I've found out over the years. And so just having these small moments of joy, just be really helpful through a stressful day. Okay, so the next work that I want to show, this is actually a block that I drew, I want to say like in 2017, 2018. So it's before I started the process of painting the surface of my blocks black. So this is kind of done in a more traditional way where you have the wood and the drawing is developed with like a Sharpie. So you don't like accidentally erase your marks. And so when it was time for me to decide what to do for the residency, I knew that this was like for sure one of the things that I wanted to do, because I drew the block a long time ago, and then I started like doing carving at a time, and it took over my life. And then it was just kind of project after project, show after show. And like I said, I had been doing more of my mixed media work and not necessarily focusing more on like my more traditional printmaking work. So this is one of the pieces that I knew for sure that I wanted to do. So on the screen, you can see my block. It's kind of in the beginning stages of carving. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner of the block. And then you can also see, again, the proofing process. So the images to the far right of the screen, you can see they're kind of grayish. There's a bunch of light spots. So I had to kind of do a lot of troubleshooting to get the right pressure and also to make sure that I was using the proper amount of ink to kind of completely saturate that nice dark area of the block, which is something that I've realized that I like to do a lot. I have a lot of like these really dense black areas in a lot of my prints, which requires a lot of ink. So here you can see the completed work. This is titled Ark of Safety. So playing on the idea like the ark, like Noah's Ark. I'm also from Arkansas. Kind of play a little bit of a play on words. But so this image is of me and my son, Ade, when he was a baby. I think we had just finished nursing, and my husband, being like the photographer that he is, he's kind of like capturing all these different moments that I thankfully get to use in my artwork. And so this picture was taken, let me see, probably 2015 or so. But I'm just kind of now getting around to using that because for a while I purposely avoided talking about myself as a mother in my work. And so I would say maybe 2020, I feel like that's something that I shouldn't have to hide about myself. So I'm kind of going back to all these memories of my boys when they were younger and just thinking about these moments and reflecting on that time and as they're growing now. Something else that I found interesting about this work, just looking at the pose, it reminded me of this piece by Elizabeth Catlett. It's titled Madonna. And so I was kind of deciding like what to do for the top of the composition because I just had like so much space up there. And so I was kind of scrolling through my phone and I just kind of keep images of her work in my phone to just reference sometimes. And I came across this and I was like, oh, well, that's the solution. There's already so many similarities between those two pieces. So another like moment of me paying homage to my art mother, Elizabeth Catlett. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is what I like to call the Stargazer series. So I did this print last year. I was invited to be a visiting artist, and the school is Austin Peay. Yes, Austin Peay University. And so I was invited, much like I am now, to do a print edition. And so this is a portrait of my youngest son, Theo. And the image was so popular that I thought, well, why don't I make a series out of it? Also, you can't do one image of one child and not do an image of the other. So this series is going to be of all the young boys in my family. I think there's about 7. And all of them would be kind of gazing up. And so it kind of for me represents like hope or wonder, like expectations of the future. And just this like tender moments. Experience between all these young boys. So this summer we were able to do like photo shoots of everybody, which I'm excited. So hopefully I can like get more of these cranked out. But while I was at the residency, I was able to do the second iteration of this series. So this is inspired by my oldest son, Ade. And so here I have a video just kind of showing you like a little bit of the carving process. So before we kind of looked at all the steps of printing, but this is a time lapse of me carving the block in preparation for this. And I'm such a big fan of just like bold black and white print, so I always kind of do, if I'm doing something in color, I always do just a black and white version of it as well. So on the right side of the screen, you can see what the black and white version of the block is. And then this is what the final print looks like. So again, it has this 2 layers. So the same process that I showed you with the previous print is done the same way. So there's 2 blocks, carving, coordinating them so everything lines up in the way that it should. Okay. As I mentioned, as was mentioned in my bio, I'm a member of Black Women of Print. So just a collective of Black women printmakers from all over the country. And so we have been doing portfolios among our collective. Our first portfolio was of few years ago. This year we're publishing our second portfolio. The theme of that portfolio is lore. So the members can kind of interpret that however we saw fit. The other thing that we decided to do, or that Tanikia Word decided to do, who's the founder, is that we would do triptychs. So I was like, a triptych, wow. So we were gonna do, I think there was like an edition of 11 or so. So it's gonna be like a total of 33 prints. And I was like, I don't have time to do 33 prints. So what can I do? I'm all about like working smarter, not harder. So I decided I'm just gonna do a print that folds. It's 3 sections. So this kind of shows what that looks like. So when you take my print out of the portfolio box, this is the experience that you get. Yeah, and so I decided to, well, I guess the title of this work is In Need of Rest, and it really reflected like how I felt at the time. The first iteration of this that I did for the portfolio was done while I was in residence at, it's escaping me. I was at another residency at the beginning of the year. So I was able to produce this work there. But I decided to print a second iteration on my own. So the main image on the inside is the same, but I decided to do a different pattern on the outside, but it'll still fold in the same way. So for me, this kind of represents like what we like to call the Superwoman syndrome. And so like on the outside, everything looks grand and shiny and beautiful, but on the inside, like sometimes you just like don't feel you don't feel that way. And I feel like a lot of times women, I feel, and also I think Black women in particular, are not able to talk about that. We're always expected to be the doers, the people that are, you know, first to help, and the kind of the backbones of our like households and sometimes our broader community. So there's this notion of like we're not allowed to be tired, and we're always expected to be present and be there for everybody else. But that is kind of like damaging. So this is, for me, is like a physical representation of that. A lot of my works in this Salt of the Earth series are inspired by the scripture Matthew 5:13, and says, "You're the salt of the earth, but what if the salt loses its savor? Is therefore good for nothing but to be kind of cast out or trodden upon the foot of men." So I do see, I am personifying women as salt and thinking about them as preservers of their family and culture and community. But kind of in reference to the scripture, what happens when like the salt is cast out, right? What happens when you're pouring out so much to other people that you're not replenishing yourself and you're not able to take care of yourself in the way that you need to, so that you can continue to be there for your family. So I've been kind of thinking about like, how would I represent that? And I was actually asked that in an artist talk one time, because most of my work is kind of shows like the regalness and the beauty and all those things. But sometimes even as artists, we're afraid like, oh, well, can I really say that, or can I really show that in my work? So just thinking about, for me, what that means, and just kind of embodying this idea of what it means to be like exhausted, really, and in need of rest. So. Okay. So the last couple of things that I want to show are my experiments with embossing and Shin Kalei. So the residency kind of served two purposes for me. Well, three purposes. One was to get rest, because like the first week I didn't do anything. I just slept and walked trails all day. It was like a pretty hard like exhibition schedule and semester. So I was just like, I just need to rest and not do anything. So that was the first goal. It was also a goal like to get 8 hours of sleep a night. But other than that, I had the goal to prepare certain print editions, because I'm going to be exhibiting at the IFPDA fair in the fall. So this was a time for me to make work for that. But I also wanted to try to do things that I had never done before, but that's still related to my practice with woodcut and relief. So one of those things was doing embossing in Shin Kalei. So if you're not familiar with the term embossing, it's basically like a dry print. So you carve a block and you soak your paper, and then you basically print that so that the impression on the block is pressed into the surface of the paper. And I also wanted to do Shin Kalei, which is like Chinese collage, I guess is the way it translates. I do collage in my practice, but I've never done it like the proper technique for Shin Kalei. So that's something that I wanted to try as well. So here you can see this is Chris Patron. She is the studio manager at the Women's Studio Workshop. So she was there to kind of help me troubleshoot and practice and kind of, get some basic pointers so I can kind of try it on my own. And on the other image on the right, you can see some of my tests. So that's just like an old block that I had, some scrap papers that I brought, also some like scrap color papers that were on hand. And so with Shinkolay, you want to use like really thin, sometimes like transparent papers as a way of like gluing them to a surface of another sheet of paper. So those were some of my early like experiments. You use different things like methylcellulose as like kind of the binder that adheres things. So at least that's what I used for my experiments. So this kind of shows the beginning of one of the prints that I did. On the left, you can see the leaf pattern block that I used. And so this was, again, purely used for me to do the embossing or to press into the surface of the paper. But I also did like a smaller woodcut that I hand embellished with like some acrylic on the bottom with a stencil, and then I did some hand painting on the flower. So the goal for me was to Shinkolay this onto a larger sheet of paper that had the leaf patterns on it. And so for the first time around, it went pretty well. So you can see some of how things turned out. I made some mistakes, but I decided that I wanted to do like a second iteration of it to kind of correct the things that I did. So this little clip on the far left kind of shows both iterations of this work. It doesn't have a name yet, so right now I'm just calling them Emboss 1 and 2. And you can see that they're stapled to these homosoap boards, and part of that is because since the paper is soaked, when it dries, you want it to dry flat, right? So stapling it to the homosoap board is going to prevent it from waving up. Okay, so that's that. And then the last thing I wanted to do is, again, still experimenting with embossing, but I also wanted to try like abstraction because that's something that I don't typically do. It's hard for me to think like that when painting. So I think printmaking is the avenue. If I ever do kind of venture into more abstract work, printmaking is the avenue that allows me to do that. Because there's already this level of like chance that's built into printmaking, because sometimes you're not sure how your things are going to turn out until you actually print them. So what I have here is my second pattern that I used for embossing. And so if you remember the Black Woman to Print portfolio print from earlier, this is the same pattern. I just kind of used it for both things. And then I took gumpy paper and another type of paper, the name escapes me right now. And so I hand printed patterns on those. I kind of tore them down and just kind of played around to see. I don't consider these finished, so I do plan to like have some other additional layers on top, but this is as far as I got during the residency. So the next slide just kind of show what it looks like up close. So I don't know, maybe another layer of something, an abstracted faces. I don't know, I'm still deciding what else is going to happen, but I do like the way they turned out so far. Here's another one. So I still have like tons of this paper, the gumpy paper, which I did not realize it was like $20 a sheet. And I was just like, I had a stipend there, and I was like, I want this one and this one and this one. And they're like, that's like $400. I was like, wow, okay. But it is beautiful, beautiful paper. I have a lot of it left over, so I do want to experiment more with this embossing because I think it turned out really well. Okay. And so this represents like why I'm here this week. So I'm going to be doing a print with the printmaking department. So this is like the drawing that I have on my block, and I'm kind of showing because now I have to get it done. So it's like extra motivation for me. So I'll be working on this throughout the rest of the week that I'm here. And I think that's it. So what's next for me? So I'll be at the IFPDA fair at the Javits Center. So Black Women of Print, we have a booth. So we're at booth 400. So if you're able to make it down to that, definitely pay us a visit. The next, I guess, big thing that I have coming is a solo exhibition at the Frisk Museum in Nashville. And then I have another thing coming up at Harvard Art Museum, which opens in March. So with the Frisk Museum, I'm excited because Carving Out Time will be showing there. They loaned it from the BMA. So that work will be there. A couple of existing works, and then I'm making new works for that show as well. So I'm really excited about that. And that's kind of what's like taking up the rest of the fall for me. So yeah, if you want to stay connected, that's my IG. I do have two IGs, but that is like the main one. So whichever one has the most followers, if you see one, that's the one that's the one you go to. And if you want to like watch that YouTube video or see previous talks that I've done, you can go to LaToya Hobbs Studio, and that is my website. And that's all. Thank you for your time.
And we'll have a quick round of questions. So please stick around for questions, and afterwards we will do some refreshments outside. But questions first. You can pick.
Yes.
I have
Quince.
two.
Okay.
One of which is right behind Dominic because it's one of your works that you did talk about.
Yeah.
And since I'm in this space all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I say good morning to Kelly R every day, you talk a little bit about that. And then the other one is a process. Those really big prints. What are you doing there?
Yeah, so this piece was acquired by the Driscoll Center, which I'm really proud of. And this actually is one of like my favorite early woodcuts. So this is an early, I mean like graduate school work. So it's around the same time as those very first two images that I showed in the presentation. Is from a series I did for my thesis work called Beautiful Uprising. So I was exploring basically the beauty practices that we uphold as Black women and whether they're influenced by like a sense of internalized racism. So I was doing a lot of research on colorism, hair texture, and it's just kind of our general like sense of body image. So a lot of these works purposely have women with like different types of like natural hairstyles. For me, it was important to showcase that there's alternatives to what we consider is beautiful, but also to kind of question people, like get people to question why they do what they do with their hair. Are you perming your hair because you really like that, or that's just what you've been taught and that's how you've taught that that's how you're supposed to be pretty? So a lot of these works were inspired by my own experiences, like when I decided to do the big chop. It was just like craziness. It was craziness, but it was mainly like a lot of the negative comments that I got were unfortunately from other Black women. So that kind of caused me to question that idea of where that comes from. But at a certain point for me, it became not so much about like trying to prove anything, but just to show, right? Because I think show how I feel about these women and kind of Black women in general, to showcase it, not trying to prove it, but show that we are that regal, beautiful, regardless of like how we choose to wear our hair. So this person is Kelly R, or Kelly, the R stands for Rachel. Her last name is Rachel. This was somebody that I used to dance with when I was at Purdue University on the Jahari dance troupe at the Black Cultural Center there. And so one thing that I loved about Kelly was just like her confidence. She doesn't have what we would describe as like the typical dancer's body because she's a plus size woman, but like she was just like, I dance and this is it, and you just got to deal with all this body on stage. So this, I just, really enjoyed her like personality, her spirit, and just the confidence in the way that she carried herself. So that's usually what kind of attracts me to my models in general, just kind of something about them that makes me want to kind of capture their physical form. So yeah, this is Kelly R. And then your second question was just like process in general, or
the really large prints.
Mm-hmm.
Do you use a steamroller? I that's a joke, but I know that actually that has happened with some prints in the past.
No, so the prints from Carving Out Time, they were printed, but there's a group called Big Ink, and if you watch the video, you can see them printing the pieces in the video. But they have basically a 8-foot press bed. It's portable, like they can take it apart. They take it apart, store it in their van, and drive around the country and basically do workshops with people and invite people to print like large woodcuts. So they call it the Big Tuna. When I was making this series, I worked on it for about a year. But I was at the Maryland Art Plate Studios downtown, and so they literally just packed up their press and came to my studio, and there was an empty room, and so they set up the press there, and yeah, they printed it. Any other questions? Yes.
I had a question about photography.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a lot of your prints are, I'm guessing, are based in photographs, and I just wanted to ask you a little bit about kind of the importance of photography to you, whether you like it seems like there's this really great mix in the work sometimes between this kind of almost timeless thing that you get from the handmade quality, but this really instantaneous thing that seems to come from this very specific glance or gesture or whatever. And I just wanted to ask you about, I'm guessing a lot of them come from photographs, and then how you bring them over onto the matrix and so on.
Yeah, pretty much all the work that I do is from photographs, and it's mainly because of time, because people just don't have time to sit, while I carve this 8-foot block of you, right? So a lot of times when I work with models, like for instance, this with Kelly, I do a combination of both. So I did we set up a photo shoot with her, but then I also sat down and did some kind of sketching as well. So the photos for me are purely just for the reference of them. It's not a more of a philosophical reason why. And so with this series here, photography was really important, just for being able to kind of document the day. And so my husband, as I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned, but he's a photographer as well as a fine artist. And so when I told him the idea for the work, got excited. He's like, what do we need to do to make it happen? And so by the time I got the courage to start, because I was like, this is a really big idea. And so we picked a day, and so he literally had a camera on a tripod at the height that kind of matched the sketches that I had told him. So I did stick figure sketches and said, hey, this is kind of the ideas for the different scenes. He decided okay, based on what you wanted to sketch, I need to set the camera up here. And so he literally just had his little remote and was just taking pictures throughout the day for each of these scenes. And then from there, it was kind of choreographing things. And so each of these scenes are maybe a combination of 5 or 6 different photos to put them together. So we go back, in the, let's see, for the middle scene, the dinner scene, that's 2 different parts of our house kind of merged together, because there's a wall that separates our dining room and kind of our kitchen. So I had to get rid of the wall. I had to say, okay, what's the line that would make sense for all of them to connect together if they're in one space. All the poses came from different photos. So my son Theo's photo was a different pose. I'm a completely different pose. And so I just kind of had to look at kind of going back to some basic perspective things and deciding, okay, if this is the horizon line, I'm intersecting here, my son should be at this point. And so it was a lot of choreographing and bringing all the different photos together. And then sometimes on the counter in the kitchen scene, it was too empty at first. And then I would call my husband and I was like, hey, can you take a picture of the pot of utensils on the counter? Because I need a reference to put it inside. And also with the boys' toys in the room. So it was just a lot of choreographing all those things together. But photography is important, but it's more just because of the time, and a lot of the people that I'm depicting don't live in the same location that I do, and so it just makes it easier in supporting the actual
drawing and painting practice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, I see here, and
Hi.
then I'll get over there.
I love the combination of the almost photorealistic elements of your work, obviously because of the role of photography, and the decorative pattern orientation that I see in so much of your work. And there is a very interesting balance and kind of disorienting effect in a number of the prints. So I was thinking about the ways in which you are combining those two, or how you move between the naturalistic, the representational, and the abstract pattern-based. Like, for example, in some of the early portraits you showed us the woman who gets lost in the beautiful pattern. I mean, in all of them.
Yeah.
In all of them, I see that tendency. And I couldn't help but obviously think of some famous other comparisons, such as Kehinde Wiley with the whole idea of the pattern and the photographic, realistic representation of the figure, or even going back to the past, even people like Paul Gauguin.
Okay.
And I was wondering about your relationship to some of these figures, either from the past and Then other works remind me very much of the gestural quality associated with German expressionist printmaking. So I'm thinking about what were some of the things that influenced you as you were developing your language.
Yeah, so all of my work has pretty much been figurative, like even in undergrad. So I kind of had to figure out like why I enjoy the figure so much. And a lot of like the patterns kind of developed as me trying to figure out ways to stay true to my desire to be a representational figurative artist. But what else can I add to that conversation of portraiture? And so patterns kind of became a natural thing. So with this work in particular, it's called Clarice too. Those are Adinker symbols. And so the larger concentric circles, that's called an Adinkerhini. It means like leadership and charisma. And the smaller one, the name escapes me now. But yeah, so they kind of crept into my work as ways to kind of have other things of interest that people can grab a hold to besides the figure. So even if you're maybe not like that much into like figurative and representational work, you can be like enticed by the texture. You can be enticed by the color. You can be kind of captivated by the pattern. So just adding a sense of like depth and richness to the work. Because I used to get like, I don't know, I guess it was like a compliment, but I kind of saw it as a backhanded compliment. Like, your work is good, but it's so traditional. I'm like, well, what's wrong with like tradition? What's wrong with tradition? And so, yeah, I kind of always avoided this like push to like not use the figure. And unfortunately, I found that a lot of, at least some of my other peers who are in like different programs, they were kind of trying to be swayed away from doing like identity-based work or like the figure. But that's just something that I was like never going to like negotiate with, like that's it. But I could say, okay, well, what can I add to it? If this is going to be a foundation of my work, what can you do to broaden the conversation? Appreciate the Kehinde Wiley comparison. That's always that's a big compliment. But sometimes right now the patterns are almost like contemplative for me in a sense, like that physicality of like carving them. I can almost kind of get lost in like the constructing of the pattern and also the carving of the pattern. But yeah, they just kind of serve as another type of visual element to make the work interesting as well. Yes.
The only printmaking I've ever done is like monotype or silk screen, which doesn't really leave anything behind. So I'm really curious, what do you do with the blocks, which themselves are like these really interesting artifacts when you're done? You must have, a billion of them at this point.
Well, not a billion. So, what I used to do is that in graduate school, I didn't have a lot of money. So I would get these 8x4 foot sheets of MDF from Home Depot. I would get them cut down to the size that would fit in my Nissan Sentra in the truck, and also the size that would fit the press, which are these. That's why all of these are that size, because that's like the largest size I could fit around in my car, and also the largest size that would fit the press. But I work on both sides of the blocks to save space. Like even the block that I have here, one side of that is the gold layer of the demo print that I showed you. So I like use both sides to save space. Where are they? Right now they're just in my studio, up against the wall. And some of them you can kind of go back and like print editions of them. Not so much the MDF because it doesn't like hold line and it's affected by moisture and stuff. So a lot of those like prints just aren't as crisp if I wanted to go back and print them. But cherry wood pretty much holds up like over time. So they just kind of get stored. And that's what kind of brought me to this thing about like, well, I can use the block as the work. A lot of times I kind of make those decisions at the beginning of starting the work. So a lot of the mixed media pieces that I showed you, they're on like painting panels because I can carve into it like I would a wood block, but then I can also paint into it like I would a painting. It can hang like a painting as well.
Another question I'm gonna like squeeze in there because I know there's something coming up that you're not talking about, which is the book.
Okay.
And so I was wondering because we have kind of a mixed crowd here of like art historians and artists, and so I want to know sort of if you could talk a little bit about your motivation for the book and what do you see as a relationship between art history for contemporary artists at this moment.
Yeah. So I'm currently working on. I don't know if I describe it as a monograph, but I'm working on self-publishing a book of my work for a couple of reasons. I think just with where I am in my career, I'm always thinking about what can I continue to do to push myself forward. I kind of, I don't know if I'm like quite classified as an emerging artist, but I'm working toward being like considered like an established artist. And so one thing that I feel is a bit lacking is just scholarship and research behind my work, which is very, very, very important to an artist. You can have phenomenal work, but if nobody's writing about it, people aren't going to really know about it. And so I am the type of person where I'm not going to wait on somebody to do what I need to be done. So I'm just going to do it myself. I remember I was at a residency at Mass MoCA, and they have the Artist Book Foundation there. And I was like, oh, Artist Book, I'm trying to do a book. And so I met with the person and I kind of, was excited. And they were like, well, maybe isn't the time for you to have a book. Or, she said a lot of times we tie books to like major museum exhibitions, or if an artist having a retrospective or something like that. And I was like, okay. But something that I did take away, she said, think about what your table of contents would be if you did have a book. And I was like, that's something really great for me to think about, like what would flesh out the work or the book besides pictures of my work. And so it's kind of been like years in the making. But hopefully 2024, the project will be finished. But I feel like it's just really important to kind of cement myself in not only just the Black art canon, but the larger art canon. And so the more people you have writing and citing your work, the better. And so it kind of does bridge that gap between people who I consider are my influences, like Elizabeth Catlett, Berkeley L. Hendricks was a major, major influence on my identity as like a painter, but also a figurative artist in general. So just kind of thinking about those people and kind of seeing like how we bridge the gap, but also just showing that there's other people making work aside from like the few artists that continue to be shown over and over again. So I don't know if that answered the question.
Yes.
Completely. Okay. Yes, Ade.
Is there a reason why there's different people and artworks have different kinds of hair?
Yes. So I like hair. I think hair is like my second medium. And I think our hair in particular is so versatile and can do so many different things. And so I think it's fun for me. I like to do my hair in different hairstyles. So I also like to show the women and also the guys that I have in my pieces with lots of different hairstyles. So I think hair is kind of like sculpture as well. It's like a sculptural medium too. Thank you. Yes.
I actually wanted to piggyback on the previous radio session. So I just find it interesting that you consider yourself like an emerging, becoming established artist, despite the fact that your art has been shown in museums and then like private and public collections. So I'm just curious about what the climate is like for Black women emerging artists and within the fine arts industry, especially because you're also a printmaker as well, and you explore more traditional mediums rather than sculpture or digital. So it's how has that been for you, really, in your career?
Well, a lot of that is also because I'm an independent artist. I don't have a gallery that represents me or markets my work. So it's me and the team of me and my husband and my boys who will soon be studio assistants. So yeah, it's really been us. And kind of what I said earlier, I don't want to wait on people to do stuff that I feel like I can do for myself. And so I used to send out packages to people, and I would get emails of people interested in my work, and I would respond, and I would never hear from them again. And so a lot of where I've come from is just trial and error and just hard work and determination. But also I really decided let me just make work that people would want to put in a museum. Carrie James Marshall talks about that, being a part of the game, knowing if you have a goal of somewhere you were to be, then you need to be making those types of things. And so I always decided that I wanted to be a fine artist. I wanted to be making work and having my work shown in museums. And so, let me make museum quality work, which is one of the reasons for the scale. I love working large just naturally. I don't know, I respect people who can work tiny. I just can't do it. It's so just making those kind of decisions to decide what I want my career to look like and how to push forward. So I don't know how to really answer it in terms of the broader context, but I can just talk about my experience. And it's really just been hustling and being kind of underground, because I've been making these prints were done 2011, 2012. And so now people are kind of seeing those works and like, oh, this is such great. I'm like, I've had this works for a long time. Like I've been here. I remember when I went to IFPDA and they were like, how come I've never heard of you? I'm like, I've been here. I don't know where y'all been, but I've been here. And so, and I was like, well, that's why people need to write about more than art. Like people are making great art everywhere. So I just kind of have to think about like what my goals are, and just really making decisions that continue to push forward. And then in terms of your question about like medium, I just decided that I'm going to do like what I'm good at and just make sure that I do it in such a way that is great, that it just, as my husband said, it can't be denied. And so I think I never really got into like trends or making decisions about my work based on like kind of what's happening. I feel like it's really important for me to be able to speak authentically about my work. So I'm not going to do something just because like if digital art is in right now, I'm not going to switch and start doing digital. That's not my thing. I don't enjoy it. I can't talk about it in a passionate way. I think it's important. No knock to anybody who does digital work, but that's not my thing and that's not like my gift. I really love what I do. And so I'm able to talk about it in a way that's like convincing and passionate, and I can teach about it because it's really like the fiber of my being. So I think you just kind of have to make decisions about like what type of artist you want to be, and then all of your other subsequent decisions need to be supporting that initial decision. Mm-hmm.
Thank you all very much. There's food out here. Another round of applause for. Thank you all for coming. Please make sure you follow her on Instagram, follow the Driscoll Center, follow the University of Maryland Gallery, and support her work and other Black artists. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, everybody. I can kind of hang around if people have other questions too.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much for your questions.
I actually did have one other question. Is that one of the things I love so much about your work is that I feel like what's exciting about the lines is that sometimes they're like really anatomical. They're like about musculature and bones. And other times they're really not. They're more like marks.
Yeah.
And I've just wondered like how self-conscious you are about that when you're doing that. Are you sort of like, hey,